What's good, everybody? Y'all know what time it is. It is Open Run via War Media. It's your boy, Joshua M. Hicks. We got a guest co-host who is not a stranger to the show. He's always a great addition whenever we can get him on the mic. This is the one and only Mike Walton, Bulls Confidential. He's the Bulls guru of this thing, man. So I'm glad to have him on here to talk all things, not just, the NBA and the Bulls, but just basketball in general. We got a big and deep and in-depth show for you. But before we start, Mike, how you doing, man?
Oh man, appreciate the intro, and you're definitely always too kind, Josh. Man, there's definitely a lot more people knowledgeable than me. I do what I can, but yeah, like I said, shouts out to Casey Johnson, Sam Smith, all the legends who I always give a big shout out to. Even guys like Vincent Goodwill who don't cover the Bulls anymore. I always want to shout out the OGs. But yeah, been doing good, man. Got to go to Wrigley yesterday, checking out the crosstown rivalry. Got to see the White Sox surprisingly pick up a win. Definitely thought they were going to get slaughtered, so it was awesome to see Luis Robert really do some work out there. I mean, I'll admit I had no idea who the White Sox had on the mound. I was like, Kyle Hendricks versus Tukey. I think it was Tukey Toussaint. No disrespect to Tukey Toussaint, but I was like, I don't know if I've ever heard of this guy. And I've watched, I feel like, a decent chunk of games this year. But long story short, great to see the White Sox get a win at Wrigley, and we'll see if they keep things going. The season is a lost cause for them, so it's any prideful wins are great for the White Sox right now. So yeah, definitely chilling, man. Like I said, besides enjoying that, just getting ready for the football season. We obviously are in Bears town, and obviously I got my brain on the Bulls, but I know the Bears are right around the corner. So yeah, just staying ready, man.
You already know, man. The Sox lost me when Tim Anderson got knocked out in the middle of a fight. That's just saying. That's when I lost it. I was like, oh, Sox are done. But
even with that being old news, I was wondering how long until somebody brought that up, because man, was that crazy.
I wasn't going to, but since you brought it there ain't no way you're the star player of your team and you get knocked out like that in one punch. Like you got a couple minutes in, but he said, "Cow, got that clock," and then this dude just.
I think in a contract year too, I believe right. So like, I know it doesn't really matter, but I'm just saying there's no good time to get knocked out. But I would say that's among the worst times, I would say, to get knocked out when you're trying to impress your boss. So yeah,
exactly.
Tough look for TA, man. But I'm hoping he's bounced back. He's had a lot going on this season. So
yeah, the only way he's gonna bounce back is probably in a new city. I'm not gonna lie. I love Tim Anderson's game. Dude is a baller. I love his confidence. But dude, anytime you go through a tenure where you got baby mama drama and you have, you get knocked out like that in a contract year, your PR team is trash. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think
they're not doing a good look and covering you up like that. So, and the crazy part is, I think Jerry will be okay with it because he's cool with this stuff, right?
Yeah,
so I think he'll be okay with it. But it's like, if you're a true Sox fan, I empathize with you because it ain't it.
That clubhouse has a lot going on, and Luis Robert recently had a quote that was like, "I'm not a leader." I believe I didn't really get a chance to go into the full quote, but that stuff doesn't bother me as much. But it is weird. Obviously, it seems like a guy who may not be maybe as committed as you would like for a superstar talent. I do wish we could take Tim Anderson's confidence doing well and put like his attitude of being a leader and being a front-facing star. We could combine Tim Anderson's old confidence with Luis Roberts' ability and make that into one player to be the franchise star of the Sox. If we could just combine those two, that would be awesome. But as far as I know, that tech doesn't exist. So like you said, they probably need to start selling off some guys soon. And I mean, at this point, hold on to Lou Bob just because he's all the fans have, really, it feels like, besides Cease. So yeah, we'll see where it goes, man.
Yeah, that's definitely true. We'll see how it goes. But we do know one thing about players that are disgruntled, quote unquote, as Woj would say. They want out, and they made it known they want out. We had a couple players, star players in the NBA this offseason that clearly made it known to their representative teams that, I want to be gone. I want to be out of there. Get rid of me. It's James Harden and Damian Lillard. They both, in the beginning of free agency, not even a week into free agency, they let it be known that they want to be traded to new places and new destinations. But James Harden, though, was really emphatic with his. Like, he made it very, very known to the public in the past couple of days that, Daryl Morey is not the one I want to play with. As a matter of fact, he's a liar. and I don't want to play for any franchise that he is a part of, which is very intriguing considering the relationship that they did have. So the fact that he was that adamant and coming out that way, and then you got Damian Lillard, who, obviously spent all of his career in Portland and realizes that he doesn't want to spend the last few years in the league that he has of his prime in a situation where the team is not going to win. Portland is truly looking like rebuilding. And with the addition of Scoot Henderson and a young Shaden Sharp and those guys, it's time to move in a different direction. And Damian Lillard understands that. He gave him a chance to see if they can improve that. Don't look good. Now he wants out. In an era now, when it comes to player empowerment and them making decisions for the betterment of their careers, how much of a blowback do you believe, Mike, are these two trade requests are going to really make for the league moving forward? And I'm just asking because we saw how this is really built over time in stars. You talk about Anthony Davis forcing his way from New Orleans to the Lakers. You talk about Ben Simmons forcing his way out of Philadelphia to Brooklyn to a point where he literally sat out half the season and was like, y'all can take my money, I don't care. And now you got a situation now where James Harden wanting out of his second straight team in a row, third straight team now in a row, after wanting out of Houston and Brooklyn to get out of Philadelphia. And you got Damian Lillard, even though we know he's the most understanding situation because he was so loyal to the franchise for so long and gave everything that he had to really represent the city of Portland, now busting a move and he's getting criticized. How much of a pushback do you believe are these moves or these requests are going to make in this new era of player empowerment?
So obviously it's always tough when there's so many voices, especially when we're just talking about the echo chamber that is Twitter on social media. It's tough to say like what the general public perception is because I feel like I'm never bothered by this stuff. I think just watching the NBA specifically long enough, you get used to every star is going to become disgruntled at some point. You always hear the stars are unhappy, and it's funny because it's like, really, what star is happy? Pretty much in the NBA, no star is literally happy besides LeBron James, who gets to decide his fate pretty much, every season, wherever he wants to go, what he wants to do, with good reason. But even somebody like Kevin Durant, we think of him as someone who controls his own destiny. And while he did eventually get what he wanted, it took a little bit longer to get there. So I think it's not something that I personally am concerned about because I think these teams have gotten a lot smarter over the years in terms of extracting assets from other teams. I think the biggest thing is 3-team trades have obviously always been a thing, or at least, in modern NBA here, but teams are taking a lot more advantage of the 3-team trade. So whenever these disgruntled superstar situations happen, the teams that have the stars, pretty much it seems like they already kind of have a built-in doomsday plan of, well, we know sort of these are the teams we're hearing the star is going to want to go to. So here's our own list of teams to bring into the deal to try to furnish some assets to make us come out better. And then maybe we can give them something or they can give up something. So it's not something I'm as worried about because I think other teams around the league don't really worry about what other teams are up to as much as people think. So they are very interested to facilitate these deals as long as they can get something out of it. Jake Fisher, he in his book Built to Lose, obviously Sam Hinkie, that was kind of his entire thing, is finding trades that he could just insert the Sixers into to sort of be that third team to get some sweetener out of the deal, but then also help facilitate it. So I think there's enough teams and picks in the league to facilitate deals that people will always sort of find ways to kind of both get what they want. The big issue you do have now is, not even joking, you have Oklahoma City and a few other teams that almost own the entire draft in terms of first round picks, over the next several years here. So it will be interesting to see if those teams become big players. But I think generally you don't see fans getting upset about this, as people did in the past. People are more accepting of stars demanding trades. And I think you almost see pushback to this point where people support the stars more than ever and are mad at the teams for not sort of acquiescing their demand. I've seen plenty of people on Twitter who are like, the Portland Trailblazers are being ridiculous. Why don't they just get this over with? Which, I obviously did not work as an assistant GM or anything of that nature, but as someone who has been close proximity to an NBA team working here, they're never going to think like that. You're always going to do the best to get something that's winning the deal for you. And in your head, if you're not winning the deal, you're not doing the trade in the NBA. That's just how those guys think. And that doesn't make sense to most people because you're saying in a two-sided trade or even a three-sided trade, everyone can't win. But that's the thing about NBA GMs and talent evaluation. Everyone has different thoughts, and usually everyone comes out of a trade thinking they won the deal. And so that's why Portland's having such a hard time right now. It seems like, or excuse me, Miami rather. Seems like Miami's still trying to play hardball over smaller assets, like the Martin twin they have, the few first round picks and assets things that they have. We know the Heat roster is a veteran roster with not a lot in terms of young talent. We all know the young talent they have just because it's pretty much the only draft picks they've had recently in terms of guys like Jaime Jaquez out of UCLA. So they have intriguing talent to get it done. And I think if Miami ever put everything on the table, the deal would get done just between Miami and Portland. But as I discussed in the NBA, that's not how it's going to work. And Miami, rightfully so, is like, we have no reason to give up everything when Damian Lillard's agent was reportedly calling around telling other teams, don't attempt to trade for my client. I will say, I think that is where Adam Silver, obviously, as he already kind of did, has to step in. You do get on a slippery slope. If it is true that you had an agent, telling teams don't trade for my client, obviously teams are going to do whatever they want. But I do think you want the agents to not have that much influence over the entire makeup of the league, I guess is a weird way to say it. So I do think it was nice that Adam Silver stepped in and sort of made the mandate that, everyone has to legally have an ability to trade for him, which obviously is true. So I could see people having a bigger issue with the Lillard one. But James Harden, I just think this is par for the course. I honestly think it's pretty hilarious. Calling Daryl Morey a liar, it's honest to God one of the funniest things. I saw that video. Just hands down, I'm sure you guys have watched it 1,000 times, but my favorite part, like, it's literally, I think Dragonfly Jones said it's the coolest thing James Harden has ever done, which, as funny as it is, he might be right, man, because, like, he says Daryl Morey is a liar. And then he looks around the room and is like, I want to say that again. he couldn't let it go just calling someone a liar once, which is obviously a massive thing for an NBA superstar to just call an NBA employee, a high-ranking guy, a liar. But to double down and make sure in case for some reason somebody didn't hear it while they all have their phones out recording, he wanted to let you know again. So I just think Harden is funny. We've seen his antics over the years when he wants to get out of a place, whether it's being extremely out of shape or just being rude in the media or not talking to your new head coach. As we all know, Stephen Silas really never had a fair shot when Harden kind of sabotaged the start of his career with the Rockets. So the Sixers seem like they're trying to play hardball, and I'm just being honest, like, Harden is one of the few guys, maybe him and Kyrie Irving, where I'm like, I don't think you want to play hardball with these guys because I'm just not sure that they're going to react the way you think like most NBA players would. Like, I very well could see Harden just having like a subpar season and the Sixers are a bad team with him on the roster if they just keep him, which is doing a huge disservice to your reigning MVP. So the Sixers specifically, I think, should be the team that should get a deal done, so to speak, right away. I don't have any problem trading James Harden to the Clippers for a package of interesting 3-and-D players because Daryl Morey, I get that he's obsessed with stars and star power is cool, but he has this image where he's painted as this great basketball mind, guy who loves analytics. And I just think if he's such a great mind, I don't see why a roster with guys who play defense and shoot threes around Joel Embiid couldn't work. Like, I get in theory why it's not exciting, but Terrence Mann, all of these players that they're reportedly would be getting from the Clippers are just excellent swing role players that every team in the league has been trying to trade for every trade deadline. So I just think it's interesting now when you put it in the context of getting a star, all these great role players become not enough. But I think if the Sixers do that trade, they would actually come out better. Like, James Harden on the Clippers, as we all know, sounds like a great, idea, but injuries, depth, we know a whole lot of things can go wrong. So I think both of these are pretty normal. I think the Lillard one was more egregious if you really do have the agent calling around. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's going to change the landscape or anything in the NBA too much. just because I think the new CBA has already restricted teams so much that we're seeing the new world of trades right now. And this is the new world of trades. So many teams don't have cap space. So if you're a superstar with this big contract and you're demanding out and you won't give your team a big list of franchises, you're going to be waiting a long time, because if you only want to go to one or two teams, you're obviously putting your franchise at a disadvantage for negotiations. So I think things are working out pretty normal. And I think you will see Harden moved before the season. I think this Lillard thing could drag on way longer than people expect, though.
Well, you make a lot of great points, man, especially with the CBA that's new CBA that's been signed, really impacting what teams can do with the salary cap space that they do have. How, with it being so limited now, even though it's rising, it's still at a limited capacity. So I think it's very interesting and how that could really affect someone like a Damian Lillard, who is supposed to make up to close to $50-60 million in the last year of his deal. I mean, it makes a lot of sense how that can linger on and making sure all the pieces are put together to make sure that they get the most out of Damian Lillard in the situation that he wants to go to. But James Harden to me is interesting too, because not just because of the fact that we know James Harden is James Harden. When he wants out, he will find a way to get himself out, right? That's nothing new. It's nothing outlandish per se that we're not accustomed to. That's just who James Harden is. What's interesting within all this to me is Joel Embiid, because Joel Embiid, being the superstar that he is in his prime in Philadelphia, let's be honest, outside of him just trying to have his own story of him trying to stay healthy and live up to the expectations of being a top player of this draft class, in which he has emerged as, even when the doubt was there, he's been through a heck of a show when you talk about a bull crap show, and during his tenure in Philadelphia. Talk about players wanting to come and go. Ben Simmons wanted to come and go. Joel Embiid, James Harden wanted to come and go. Sam Hinkie, and the whole, trust the process and the debacle of that, not being able to draft Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum because you wanted to make the trade for the number one pick and you get Markelle Fultz and he flops after his first season. The list goes on. Twitter wars, fake Twitter burner accounts, right? Like the dude's been through a lot in Philadelphia, and yet the closest he's ever gotten was the Eastern Conference Finals that he could never get over the hump in. And this last season, knowing that James Harden played so bad in Game 7 of that conference semifinals against Boston, now you're dealing with a star that you want to stay, yet he's gone. And you now have a new head coach in Nick Nurse, whom, even though you can argue that Doc Rivers had his ups and downs and maybe wasn't the best fit in Philadelphia, Nick Nurse, even though he can be, he's going to have his hands tied as well. So what does Joel Embiid do? If I'm him right now, I'm thinking, you want me to bank on the fact that you got all this cap space for next season, and you're going to use all of it to get these superstars to come through when, let's be very serious, not a lot of superstars want to go to Philadelphia. That is not historically proven that superstars are willing to leave their franchises to sign contracts in free agency or do sign-in trades to play in the city of brotherly love. It's not that much love over there for that. So because of that, if I'm Joel Embiid, why am I staying? This is the perfect time for me to try and get out. If you trade James Harden, it's like, okay, if you want to be loyal to Philadelphia, you can. I'll play for the season out. After that, I'm out of there. You got to ship me out, because it's clear that Philadelphia has a struggle in maintaining top talent and winning deep in playoff runs with top talent. And the one time that they had a chance to do that was when they had Jimmy Butler, and they let Jimmy Butler go. So if I'm Joel Embiid, I want out. Trade me to a team where I know I have a good chance of winning while my prime is still intact, knowing that I have an injury history that could really impact what my future could look like. If you're Joel Embiid, what do you do with this case?
Yeah, I mean, you bring up probably the best point there, which is that with the mounting pressure of this situation, obviously everyone's waiting to see how it works out. The biggest thing that, we don't know is Harden and Embiid, their relationship sort of obviously off the court. that's a big factor, because if they actually don't really have much of a, actual friendship, it's strictly professional here, I would think it'll be pretty easy for Embiid to pivot and support, obviously, the Sixers in the front office and whatever their decision is, if that's truly what he wants to do. Everything you outlined made total sense to me. I think the biggest thing there would just be, it's really going to come down to, I guess I'm trying to think of how to say it, but it comes down to, what does Joel Embiid really care about? What is really his motivation? Excuse me. But basically here, Embiid won MVP, which was the entire thing he, with all due respect, would not shut up about. This is the only way I could say it. He really wouldn't. He would not. He wouldn't shut up about it, to the point where he was doing interviews about how he was shutting up about it, which was among the funniest things I had ever seen. He's like, yeah, I want MVP so bad, I don't even want it anymore. Like, I lose all the time. Like, why is I was like, wow, this guy, he was laying it on thick. I have to give it to him. Like, in the end, voters afterwards were like, wow, we probably should have voted for Jokic. But I always hate people always do that in hindsight. Embiid deserved it, and he got the award. But my biggest point is, he talked as if MVP was very openly the thing he cared about the most, almost pretty much saying without saying that he cared about MVP as much, if not more, than a championship. I won't put words in his mouth, but he made it very clear that the MVP was almost like, his number one goal. Which fair, the guy's runner up. It's not that he shouldn't be wanting to be MVP. It's just, when you think about Joel Embiid, I feel like you do, fair or not, think of a player who cares about individual accomplishments. And that's mostly because the team hasn't had much, as you said, postseason success. So when you think about Embiid, I think Kevin Durant, I hate always bringing up KD, because I feel like KD hates people always bringing up KD, but he's the perfect person to talk about in this situation. What do you care about your legacy? KD's legacy is going to be extremely complicated, and he's a smart guy and he trolls on Twitter, but he knows as much as anyone that when we talk 50 years from now, the way him and LeBron James are talked about is going to be night and day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty unfair, because they did pretty much the same things in terms of leaving teams and switching around. But LeBron is LeBron, and he has the way he did it and the way it was perceived of wanting to go win. Cleveland can't get it done. Got to go get it done. Go to Miami. Got to win a championship for Cleveland. Got to win in Cleveland. Got to do the biggest winning, which is go to LA, the biggest, most famous franchise, and I'm going to win there too. Whether or not it's true, he's always made it seem like it's about winning. It's about being the best, winning a championship for this team, this city, this franchise. Kevin Durant, once he did the Warriors run, it was very open that people were like, we don't really know what his motivation is. Going to the Brooklyn Nets team with Kyrie Irving, though I, for reasons that all my friends know, personally thought, man, this is a great move for KD.
Yep.
It was pretty much going to a disaster, leaving at the time, the best team in the league that really, if he stayed there, still to this day, in my opinion, is the greatest what if in NBA history. Which is crazy, because Derrick Rose injury, obviously pretty high up there. But if Kevin Durant stays on the Warriors for like the rest of his career, even till now, I think the Warriors could, who knows, have 8-9 championships. Like, we really just don't know a Steph Curry, Kevin Durant team forever. So him leaving to go to Brooklyn just made no sense. And then obviously we know how that worked out, and now he's in Phoenix. When you look back in history, it's going to seem like Kevin Durant's, his moves, how he changed franchises, it was a guy who was a great talent and kind of was just randomly trying things out. And while I don't think there's anything wrong with that, that is how history will remember you. And when you look at LeBron, again, it was always about going to put myself in a position to be on the best team to win the championship. So this is all about Embiid. And the point is, Embiid has to decide if it really is about winning for him. Is he committed to doing it the hard way? Does he want to go to sort of a built-in situation? I think Leon Rose, everyone knows the president of the Knicks, has a big connection to him. So the Knicks are the obvious elephant in the room for pretty much every premium in the center in the league who everyone thinks might want out. And I guess when I say every, I'm really just talking about Karl Anthony Towns and Joel Embiid.
Yeah.
Knicks are well positioned to make a deal for those guys. I think that's your biggest threat for Philadelphia. You don't want the Knicks to come really calling, because if he pulls a James Harden or a Damian Lillard, he's probably just going to have to play ball with the Knicks, because they do have great assets. And obviously you're not getting anything in return that's going to equal Joel Embiid. But if he wants out, you're just going to have to deal with it. And realistically, he is an injury-prone guy. So you can try to think of this as a long-term move and make out. But long story short, if I'm Philadelphia, I'm not doing anything. Joel Embiid is going to have to just leave, in free agency one day and just leave me high and dry. Similar to the Angels with Ohtani in baseball. When I have the talent, he's staying here until he just leaves. So I don't think they should be too worried. I don't think James Harden, whatever happens with him, is going to factor too much into it. I think Nick Nurse is going to be the big deal. I'm not sure how his coaching style is going to mesh with Embiid and how they're going to get along, but that's the biggest factor. If they hit it off and Embiid buys into everything Nick Nurse is into right away, I think that team is going to be great regardless of who else is on the roster. Just an Embiid Nick Nurse team, I think, has the potential to be like the best defense in the league. And Nick Nurse is smart enough to build out an offense around that. So I think the biggest factor is Embiid ready to take a step back on offense if it helped the team? If he went from scoring 30 points a game to scoring 24, but he was leading the league in blocks, and let's say they traded Harden for all those role players from the Clippers. I couldn't think of Norm Powell's name, who I was trying to think of. Let's say Norm Powell has a career year in Philadelphia, scoring 22 points a game in a Nick Nurse offense. There are ways to get it done. We've seen Nick Nurse lead a team to a championship that no one really thought had a chance to win the whole thing. So, Kawhi Leonard during those prime years, or that prime year, was playing on one leg that entire postseason. So if you got a healthy Embiid, I have utmost faith in Nick Nurse to be a serious title contender. So if I'm Embiid, I'm not trying to go anywhere. I'm trying to make things work with a championship coach. But again, I'm not so sure that he feels that way, and we'll find out in about a year here what Embiid's really thinking. But if I'm him, I'm sticking it out in Philadelphia just because, right or wrong, I think they have done everything in their power to appease him over his time there.
That's an interesting point that she said, and especially talking about the Nick Nurse to Joel Embiid comparison. If they really do hit it off, which there is a good chance it can, I mean, that does make some sense. Obviously, you got to figure out what the reinforcements are going to look like, especially if James Harden doesn't resign there. But it's an interesting component to think that that you definitely have to think about.
And I think just really quick on that, I want to say, because I like, brought me to the Bulls in an interesting parallel there. That's why I think they need to stop worrying about, they're the one team I almost really don't care what the hell I get back. Get Harden out of there. If he's being like just a jerk and just trying to ruin everybody, get him out of here. Joel Embiid, of all players, the way he is emotionally invested in the team and things, doesn't need that around him. You got to bring in a calm veteran, just someone like a Mike Conley, not specifically Mike Conley, but I'm saying a guy whose attitude is going to be a calming presence in the locker room and try to make everyone understand each other, because I think that's going to be big for them. Because let's say Embiid and Nick Nurse don't hit it off, which I actually think is more likely, you're going to need that guy who can just keep them amicable, and maybe he's the guy that gets along with Nick Nurse. Maybe that's Tobias Harris. Maybe he's already there. Because I think the Bulls, how it relates to them is, it's not a well-kept secret, I don't think. Now who knows how they're doing. At the beginning of the Zach LaVine-Billy Donovan relationship, it didn't seem like they got along very well. Still to this day, it seems like it's kind of just professional. It seems like it's a boss at his employee. It doesn't seem like Zach LaVine's, exactly the biggest Billy Donovan fan in the world. Conversely, I think it feels like Caruso lives for Billy Donovan, will die for the guy. DeMar DeRozan, not as vocal about it, but seems like he really likes Billy Donovan as a head coach. Having guys like that who are big Billy Donovan supporters, who are also stars and big voices in the locker room, that helps the Bulls stay afloat. Whereas I think if you didn't have those guys on the team, it actually would be a disaster, because it would be like the year when Zach LaVine and Billy Donovan and the Bulls were terrible when they first traded for Vooch. You have a fractured locker room, an unhappy leader, and Vucevic alone isn't enough to sort of rein in that locker room. You need multiple guys who are buying in. So I think the quicker the Sixers can get Harden out of there and get some guys who are going to be Nick Nurse supporters in the room, it'll just make the team better regardless of the on-the-court talent.
Yeah, very good points. But I got to highlight a couple of things that you said before we transition to some Bulls talk, because the Bulls 76ers talk is actually kind of live right now. So we're definitely going to highlight that. But I got to get to this. Do you really think that Kevin Durant, if he never left Golden State, is the biggest what if in league history? That's a very bold statement to me, because there's a lot of other components, right? Of course, you got D Rose's injury. Of course, you got D Rose's injury. If he never got hurt, that's a big one. One that's underrated, estimated for me, in regards to the Bulls, which was actually talked about today on the Bulls Talk podcast, featuring my guy and my guy Tony Gill, Jason Goff, and we always talk about Casey Johnson. Shout out to those guys at NBC Sports Chicago. The reality of the big three of LeBron James, Dwayne Wade, and Chris Bosh really coming to Chicago to play with a prime Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah. How close that really was from happening. Just off of those two alone, I don't know if Kevin Durant can top those two. I'm sorry. I just don't know, because if you really talk about the what ifs like that, you may not have Kevin Durant winning championships. That's the truth to me. You know what I mean? So it's interesting that you brought that out. And I was like, wait a minute. I got to see this other component that can potentially challenge that, because I'm like, if you're talking about our prime Derrick Rose, prime Joakim Noah, prime LeBron James, prime D Wade, and a prime Chris Bosh all on the same roster, come on, man. You got to at least 2 to 3 championships like they did in Miami. But the legacy is so much different. Being the first group, LeBron being the first guy to bring a championship to United Center since the GOAT himself. Oh man, I mean, I don't know how that will work. I don't know how that does it compared to the Kevin Durant conversation. I'm sorry, I just had to put that out there.
All right, well, yeah, I mean, I was just about to say, well, yeah, check it out. I mean, I'm not gonna blow your mind, because we all know basketball history very well around here. But I've had not this exact same conversation. Sorry, I think an ambulance or something going past. I've not had this exact same conversation a ton, but I believe, at least with a few friends, I've discussed this like a few times, is why it's my biggest what if. Because obviously, as Chicago fans, we all want to say Derrick Rose's injury, or even I'm surprised you didn't touch on if the '90s Bulls didn't break up when they did.
Yeah,
if they kept going, can Jordan keep going? But for me, it's easily and I know you're like, what? You're saying easily? You're doubling down after saying that was a crazy one. But so the Warriors dynasty, as we know it, 4 NBA titles, right? Yeah, 4 championships, I believe, and counting. You got from Steph. And you have Kevin Durant's 2 championships obviously come from the Warriors after he had failed with the Thunder. Very young. He doesn't get enough credit for making the finals as young as he did with that Thunder team with Harden and Westbrook. But the reason it's the biggest what if to me is when you look at the makeup of the league, and I'm not going to take all the credit. I'm sure I've maybe even secondhand heard this somewhere else, or other writers have touched on it, but it's really about the teams that won the championship just in that same time period. And the fact that the 90s Bulls, obviously, 6 championships. You have the Warriors with those 4. And you think, okay, let's say they got to 7. Because if they win one more championship than the 90s Bulls, over a, whatever 8-9 year span, people are like, wow, that's more impressive. 7 titles from this Warriors group as we know them, even though, role players will change. But the main guys, compared to, we know Jordan's 90s Bulls is the best team, sort of the best dynasty because of their 6. You look at 2015 when the Warriors got rolling, they win that one with the normal team with Harrison Barnes before they became the Super Warriors. We were sort of introduced to them. They lose to the Cavs, and that's when the world turns on its head. After they lose to the Cavs, they have that little weird cap spike thing in the offseason and the whole Hamptons stuff that leads to Kevin Durant going to the Warriors. Kevin Durant going to the Warriors, I'm sure you remember, but I feel like you have to watch videos and stuff from then. How pissed off people were was incredible.
Oh yeah, I was wonderful.
Stephen A. Smith literally was almost telling people not to watch the NBA anymore. And I mean, and many writers were, not to just call him, like people were like, there's no point in watching. Like, yo, this is over. Like, don't even watch. And to their point, we all watch, but we know what happened. They absolutely destroyed the Cavaliers 2 straight finals because a team with Kevin Durant and Steph Curry, and also prime Klay Thompson and Draymond. It's literally, you could have me or you out there as the 5th guy. It just doesn't matter. They're gonna win at that point with these guys being healthy and not worried about injuries. So it's incredible to me that we only have 2 titles from that group: the Kevin Durant, Steph Curry Klay Thompson, Draymond Warriors, because obviously whatever happened between him and Draymond and his general feelings, the team broke up. But they lose to the Raptors, and what often gets lost in the shuffle because of Kawhi's injury history, as we all know, Kevin Durant was injured, and Kevin Durant being hurt is a big part of the Raptors even having sort of the wherewithal to be able to put together that run to beat them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's assume that still happens. He stays with the Warriors instead of leaving. That next championship, obviously, bubble year, you got the Lakers beating the Miami Heat. Um, it's unfair to do the year-to-year thing and say, because obviously time changes, who knows? But if you're telling me as long as that team has Draymond, Kevin Durant, Steph, and Klay Thompson, I'm taking them over a team that is basically the same concept of star power, except it's just Anthony Davis and LeBron. At that point, you're kind of talking about the Cavs versus Warriors matchup almost, except it's just a much better version of the Cavs, to be fair, with Anthony Davis. But I just think the Warriors are going to beat that Lakers team in a slugfest of a Western Conference Finals. And you got the Kevin Durant Warriors going against a Miami Heat team that was an underdog story, we obviously, I think we all know how that, pans out. So just keep going for a quick run here. Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks, when they beat the Suns, let's just put Giannis and the Milwaukee Bucks against Kevin Durant, Steph Curry, Draymond, and Klay Thompson. Any of these teams, even as they get older, we see how they're doing now. As you put these teams up against them, it's conceivable that the Warriors win. Let's say they beat the Heat. That's 3 titles for the KD group. If they barely beat the Milwaukee Bucks, because that team was awesome, that's 4 titles for the KD Warriors. They literally won the championship in 2022 without him. So you got that. And then last season, they had a lot of struggles, did not obviously come anywhere close to being a title team. If they had Kevin Durant on this current Warriors team, we can all agree they're not as worried about their depth. And they don't need to make a move to trade for Chris Paul in a desperate move to bring in more talent, because you don't need more talent when you have Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. So the reason it's the biggest what if to me is because we don't even know how Kevin Durant's career ends. If the Suns run off 3 titles in 5 years here, we're going to all change how we feel about Kevin Durant. And I would just remind people he could be doing that next to Steph Curry right now. So I just think when you think about the fact that Kevin Durant is still almost, not at the height of his powers, but pretty close now. And Steph Curry, who I admittedly thought was done, I thought the Celtics were going to beat them quite easily. Steph Curry reminded us why he's still Steph Curry. With the two of them still being as good as they are, I just can't really think of a greater one. The Miami Heat could maybe come close, just like if Bosh obviously never had what was going on, because we saw that team when they were rolling. But to me, it's Kevin Durant and the Warriors, because those teams and those players are still winning now.
As we talk about this season, though, there's going to be a little bit of a wrinkle to this season. We're going to have an in-season tournament where, for a couple weeks leading up to a month, you're going to have players in different pools, per se, playing exhibition games against each other that lead to the actual seeding in their pool. And based on the seeding in their pool, they'll actually have a playoff-style tournament that will lead to an actual champion of the tournament with incentives. I look at this as pretty much a bigger professional version of an AAU tournament. That's pretty much what I look at it as. And I'm not going to lie and say that I'm a huge fan of this, because it's interesting that you have this component being implemented while you also are, trying to get through an 82-game season. This doesn't necessarily impact playoff implications. So it's like, okay, what's the point? However, I will say this could bring a different level of excitement from a fan perspective. And we all know that the NBA is good at marketing their fan bases. So to be able to do that, I'm very intrigued to see how this playing tournament is going to work, especially when you talk about the Bulls and their pool, because their pool is actually a kind of a winnable pool. In the East, they're part of the called East C group. They're playing Boston, which is the tough one. They've always played very well against the Nets, and you got the Raptors and the Magic. Those are 2 other teams that you should be able to beat consistently with the talent that the Bulls have. Do you see, first of all, who do you see in general making it and winning this thing out? But do you see the Bulls actually making even a deep run in this in-season tournament?
So I think I do see the Bulls making a run in the in-season tournament, but not even because I think the players will be extremely motivated. I think, the financial stuff is nice. Everyone loves money, obviously. It will be interesting to see if the coaches give the young guys maybe a chance to play more minutes than usual in these games because of the stakes. Because that's what I'm most interested to see is like the unintended outcomes that people aren't thinking of. Because we could have a regular season game where Io DeSunmu gets 35, 36 minutes and DeMar DeRozan only plays 28 because Io is making a certain amount of money, and we know what DeRozan makes, and Io cares a lot more about winning the prize money than DeMar DeRozan. So they're willing to let him have a little bit more leeway and play a little bit longer of a leash. Maybe the same with Kobe White. Kobe White would really like to get that bonus money. Zach LaVine doesn't give a damn about the bonus money. So maybe Zach LaVine gets a couple nights off for some in-season tournament games, which the NBA doesn't want to happen. But I don't think they're going to be able to avoid certain players not playing in those games or taking them seriously. Um, Ultimately, I think it's harmless. I like it. Not like actually because I don't care about the players as much. I'm not invested in them winning money. I know they're compensated well and they're for the most part happy about it. But I like it because I think the NBA should be actively doing things to try to create more rivalries or at least make rivalries more important. Um, for me, at least growing up, I feel like rivalries were always a massive part of the NBA. And I think as time went on, we saw divisions are less important. People don't really care as much about the individual divisions. They just know the East and the West. And as that became more of a shift, you don't see the rivalries mattering as much. Now the rivalries are from social media moments we know, or things that happened that became really big. We know about the police presence with Chris Paul. And so we always remember that. Or we know that Nikola Jokic, ran into the Morris twin. And so whenever the Miami Heat play the Nuggets, even if Morris isn't there anymore, there's always that little bit of a rivalry from that incident. Orlando and Chicago, the Vucevic trade has almost created a natural rivalry because the fans are always debating online, who won the trade? Was it a bad move? So I think the NBA did a good job with the groupings because that's the only way this will matter is if you nail those groups. Like I believe the Kings and the Warriors are in the same group. That's a team that I think they already have the built-in rivalry with Mike Brown coming from the Warriors to be the head coach and doing a great job there. So I think they built enough intrigue and storylines into these groupings to sort of make them work. And I think for the most part, they're all balanced as well, which is pretty tough to do. Obviously, you have some groups like the Warriors Kings group. Seems like the Warriors will probably be pretty dominant. But again, we forget these are normal regular season games. So we don't know if this is a night where Steph Curry might not be playing or Draymond's out. So it's going to be tough to predict, who can win it all because it's really just going to be about who's in a good groove at that point of the season. So that's why I think the Bulls will actually be a threat to go pretty far in this thing in all seriousness. Uh, I think the best bets, are still going to be you're thinking about teams like Phoenix, if they hit a roll in the middle of the season, that team's gelling, Bradley Beal's getting used to his new teammates. Obviously, they would, whether or not, again, they care about the in-season tournament, they might just be playing well at that time. So I think it's a good idea. I never think it's bad to try to make the regular season more exciting. I just do think they should have put some sort of prize for the fans, if you get what I'm saying. The money is great. The money is definitely going to get most of the players to care about these games a little bit more. But the next obvious step is going to be figuring out what way they can get the fans to care a little bit more. And I understand why they didn't want to do like you get the number one overall pick, if you win the tournament, because you don't want to do something that dramatically shakes up the power structure of the league. But I think I know the NBA doesn't want to shake anything up, but would it really be crazy to be like, you get an extra second round pick at the end of the second round? There's one more pick for the team that won the in-season tournament. Start small and then go from there. I think if you have some sort of like draft pick or prize for the team on top of the money, then you'll have the fans really caring because we know the fans want their teams to get more draft picks or whatever. Fans don't care about the players making money. So I think when they get that balance right, it'll sort of work out better. But I think overall, this is going to be something that years down the line, everyone is a fan of, is ingrained in the culture because the play-in tournament, I hated it when it was brought up. LeBron James hated it. LeBron James was calling for people to lose their jobs when the idea was originally presented. And now we either all love the plan or has accepted that it's a great idea for teams that are really trying to make the playoffs, that push at the end of the season. So just like the play-in tournament, I think it'll eventually grow on us. But I think just like the play-in tournament, it needs to have some sort of real stakes still. But I think this is a good start.
I feel that. I feel that. Maybe it'll grow on me as we go throughout the NBA season and we actually get to see it for itself. Obviously, like you said, the playing tournament was the first timer, and eventually it grew on people. Maybe it can do the same over here for me.
You
So
say that now, but you will be telling your grandkids about when DeMar DeRozan hit back-to-back game winners in the in-season tournament in Las Vegas in 2024. It's going to be a big I'm telling you, there's going to be some big moment for the Bulls that happens maybe in the championship in Las Vegas. And if the Bulls have a normal season where they don't make the playoffs or they lose in the first round, as much as fans hate it, I can guarantee we can come back to this episode and there will be fans talking about how their favorite moment of the season was when the Bulls went on a run to win the in-season tournament. Because at the end of the day, fans are fans. We want to root for our teams. And if you give the Bulls a way to get a trophy, Bulls fans can say they don't care all they want, but when Zach LaVine raises that trophy, you can bet all of the money in the world there will be someone who says this proves that Zach LaVine is a winner now. that the Bulls won the in-season. People will make fun of it, but someone will have that approach. If the Bulls win this, they will say you can't talk about LaVine not winning anymore. He won the in-season, championship, and that as funny as hell as that sounds, that's exactly what the NBA wants to happen. And I think eventually they'll get their wish. This will matter to people eventually. It's just going to take some time.
I promise you right now, if anyone wants to validate Zach LaVine's success, if he never wins a championship by saying that he won the in-season tournament, I'm gonna slap that person's across the face. I'm just gonna do it.
Well, while you bring that up,
now.
I will let you know right now, my personal Super Bowl will be if the Golden State Warriors win the in-season championship and Chris Paul has to hoist that goddamn in-season championship trophy before he gets literally his entire career's work, the NBA title. Do you know the amount of memes, dude, we're going to see on Twitter from Chris Paul being Chris Paul winning the first in-season championship? No disrespect to Chris Paul, might be the funniest career turn of all time, just because of how we think of it. It's legitimately if right at the end, Michael Jordan hits the shot, sinks the Utah Jazz, 98, the pump it, everybody pumping their fists, Jordan retires. Next season, John Stockton and Malone come back for the Jazz, and the Jazz don't win the championship, but they win the in-season championship, the regular season tournament. Can you imagine how much fun people would have made of John Stockton and Charles Barkley? Any of these guys whose whole career is hinging on, you didn't win the big one, you didn't win the title. I think it almost hurts them more, the idea of being a regular season, in-season champion, especially a guy like Chris Paul, who obviously we don't know how many years he has left in the NBA. So there's quite a few funny scenarios for me that I'm rooting for the in-season championship. I mean, Kyrie Irving leading a team to the in-season championship, that is going to be news headlines for days if that happens. So as much as it seems like it's an annoying, weird idea by the NBA, I think people are really going to grow to like it much, much quicker than they expect.
Yeah, we'll see about that. But one thing I definitely do want to continue to see more of, ideally down the line, is more Bulls players making the Hall of Fame. Mm-hmm. So that's what I really want to do. But we all know that the Hall of Fame class of 2023 was announced and finally inducted this past week. That highlights Chicago's very own Dwayne Wade, Paul Gasol, Becky Hammond, Dirk Nowitzki, Tony Parker, Greg Popovich, and more. When you think about the class of 2023 overall, it doesn't beat last year's class where you had a whole bunch of GOATs, including Kobe Bryant himself. God rest his soul. But this is a darn strong class itself too. And, when you look back on the Hall of Fame that just took place, to you, just real briefly, what is one of the biggest things that caught your eye or that you loved about the inductment ceremony?
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, obviously, as you said, being biased, I love some former Chicago Bulls getting in. Although, I guess I won't reflect too kindly on Dwayne Wade's Bulls tenure here because if you go to my Twitter, it will just make me sound like a liar. I was not a big fan of that point of Bulls history just because I grew to have a healthy rivalry dislike of D Wade from obviously his time battling with the Chicago Bulls, but um, first, I just want to start with Powell because he was sort of in the back of my mind. People forget what a big deal it was when he signed with the Bulls, just because the Bulls
Mm-hmm.
getting a big free agent ever was a massive deal.
Mm-hmm.
Him feeling like that he could leave the Lakers because he felt the Lakers were a sinking ship, and he felt like the Bulls as an organization and a franchise were more of a big picture, better move than the Los Angeles Lakers. Again, it's lost now. That's a massive deal in the NBA landscape. The Chicago Bulls still had pull. They were still somewhat of a franchise that players cared about. You know, Pau Gasol was ready and did leave the Los Angeles Lakers to come here for a chance to win a championship. And you know, I often forget that he was an all-star here, just because I think of that as old man, semi-washed up Pau who still had his LA Fitness game. But that LA Fitness game took him quite far that year after looking back at the numbers and some highlights. So awesome. I could literally see him taking that set shot in my sleep at this point without him jumping, using no knees at all, just straight elbow. So very happy for Pau Gasol to get in there. Dwayne Wade, though, I think is without a doubt just the biggest story, the headline, what everyone should be and has been talking about. Arguably one of the greatest shooting guards of all time. Many people say he's the second best, some have him as third. Either way, how you want to slice it, one of the five best shooting guards to ever play the game. So about time, obviously, you know, that we see him when he's eligible, he gets in there. I think there's not really much I can say about Wade that hasn't been said already. We know what an amazing talent he is and that he has roots here. And what a great person, it goes without saying, he is off the court. Tremendous, obviously, as a father and everything else. But I think what sticks out to me just randomly as a Bulls fan is I think it was 2009, maybe. But this is just a random for me, just best moment I remember of D Wade's career that's not a championship or playoff game. I believe it was double overtime. I can't remember who the player was. It may have been John Salmons, but
Yeah.
I remember Dwayne Wade rips him up. Yeah, goes like full court, takes like a running 3-pointer, drains it, runs on the Miami scores table after the clock expires and was pumping his chest. And, you know, that was kind of after he was already had won the championships and was the Wade that we kind of know him as to some extent, at least in terms of the success he had with Shaq as a very, very young player, which people forget how young he was. I just think of that because D Wade at the height of his powers was defensively an absolute menace. Would just rack up the steals and lock up one of your best players, and also create a crazy amount of offense for a team without being a guy who ventured out to the 3-point line in a time where, as we saw, guys were starting to really make that a part of their game if you were a star player. And it says a lot that Wade was able to put up the gaudy scoring numbers that he did without being a big time 3-point shooter. And he inspired a lot of players that we see today that still have the mid range. And pretty much any guard in the NBA that has a back to the basket game has Dwayne Wade a little bit as an inspiration of theirs. So um, he was a massive influence on the sport, and definitely him getting into the Hall as the headliner, just because that entire generation of players, I think them all being in the Hall of Fame is sort of like what we're all waiting for, the D Wade, Carmelo, LeBron. All of those guys, you know, once they're in the hall, we can feel like our era of basketball is sort of fully represented. And so that's why I think, you know, him getting in there was definitely the biggest.
I agree with you, man. I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on this, but I'm gonna briefly target two direct people, but mainly one person in general. And that's the Greg Popovich, Becky Hammond effect. Because Greg Popovich, we already know, is a GOAT head coach, 5 titles, literally the only coach you could think of that literally won with the best arguably one of the best big men in the game back to back in that way. When you talk about him winning with David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and then obviously, going into the same Hall of Fame class as one of his players, Tony Parker, who emerged on that Spurs franchise and dynasty as well. But Pop is still instrumental when you talk about not just what's going to go on now with Wembyama being there, But the development of Becky Hammon and being able to start the trend of getting female coaches into the NBA. And that experience for between them two and for Becky Hammon really opened the gateway for her to go to the WNBA and just slaughter everybody. And Becky Hammon is really changing the game of what it means to be a head coach, not an NBA coach, not a WNBA coach, a coach in general. And what she learned in the NBA is really transferred to the WNBA, to where now the WNBA, it's a powerhouse. They're literally building a dynasty over there with the Las Vegas Aces. And the fact that all that is going on in the way that they did it, that doesn't happen without Greg Popovich giving her that NBA experience, which is now we're seeing a more of a trend of female athletes and female or former female players coming as coaches in some sort on teams, but also even in front offices. We talk about the Tina Thompsons, the Swin Cashes, really helping give perspective to change the direction of some of these franchises in the NBA. That doesn't happen without Becky Hammon being the first to come along, and Greg Popovich has started that trend. And those two really get a lot of credit to not just transforming the NBA, but basketball as a whole and what that looks like moving forward. So I definitely got, for me, everybody talks about D Wade and Pau Gasol, Tony Parker, and all those guys, and that's great, well deserving of it. But the NBA doesn't really get to where it is now in the future moving forward, really without those two changing the game in the way that they are. And
Yep.
and that's definitely a huge thing that's kind of undertoned in this, but it needs to be praised and worthy and addressed.
Yeah, and on top of that, I just wanted to also touch on Greg Popovich's work with Team USA. He's had a huge impact on them in terms of how they run the organization, how they choose and scout players to be on the next team. And then obviously he won gold medal being a head coach of, I believe, the 2020 team. And then I know he also, I believe, has a gold medal as an assistant coach with one of the older teams. But yeah, pretty much success follows the guy everywhere he goes. So one of the greatest coaches in NBA history, unequivocally. And honestly, maybe the greatest coach in sports history, but it's obviously a big debate. But when you look at the consistency of him, we don't really ever think of Greg Popovich as a losing coach besides like 2 years of like a 30+ year career.
Right. That's very true, man. That's very true. So shout out to everyone in the Hall of Fame class this year. Well deserved. And they all paved the way to where they are now for the future of basketball to thrive. So we definitely got to give their props to them. We're going to be wrapping up the show here in a little bit. So we're going to transition real briefly into some Team USA basketball. They are now currently 3-0 in the World Cup in the exhibition realm before they eventually take on the more serious games in the international realm, starting, I believe, next month. But the Team USA in this World Cup, they have a lineup where it's not what you would expect. Let's put it that way from a star power perspective. And it's becoming sort of a trend now in more recent years. So you have a lot of players that are stars, but not superstars as of yet, with their respective teams and respective status in the league, consistently playing in situations like this. They normally save those players for like the actual Olympic games. But when it comes to World Cup basketball, they just pretty much put a roster enough just to get by. But this year is looking a little different. So far so good. We talk about the players that they have: the Mikal Bridges, Jalen Brunsons, Anthony Edwards, Walker Kessler. You name it. Those guys over there right now, currently constructed, they're really putting in some serious work and they're winning games. Real briefly, who is the guy that's gonna help Team USA the most to win games, and also the guy that can use this to make that extra leap and solidify more of their status in the league next season?
So I think the guy that is going to help them most to win games and just advance here is going to be Paulo Banchero. Anyone who follows me on Twitter knows that I love to hate on the Orlando Magic as much as anyone. It's one of my favorite pastimes. But I hate on them just to piss off Magic fans and have fun with the fact that I don't think the Vucevic trade was as bad as everyone likes to make it out to be for the Bulls. But at the end of the day, that team I do understand is talented and they're interested, and I do think, or excuse me, interesting, and I do think they're going to be a play-in team this year, as far as the Orlando Magic go. But Paulo Banchero is unquestionably the leader of the Magic. But I thought in the Team USA setting, I was like, I get that he's a big time scorer. I'm not sure if he's enough of a well-rounded player overall. And I think I might have said it on Twitter, but if not, I can say it here. Defensively, he has impressed the hell out of me. He's been decent in ball screens, and he's been swatting a lot of shots around the rim. Obviously, FIBA's rules with being able to bat the ball around the basket a little bit more helps and opens that up. But I think Paulo Banchero's defense has been way better than I expected. And if he is going to be a great defender for them on a team that already has Jaren Jackson, the defensive player of the year, I think that's going to make Team USA, easily the most quality team there. So Banchero and his jump defensively, or at least jump defensively in FIBA play, I think that'll be the most crucial sort of X factor for the team. But in terms of the player that can use this to sort of heighten, I guess, their standing within the league here, it would be Austin Reeves for me. He doesn't really need any more heightening, if you ask most people, because the guy was a relative unknown and almost became like a rock star in Los Angeles overnight once he got the LeBron James blessing. We know how that works. But the LeBron James blessing isn't what got him that bag. How well he plays is what got him that bag. I didn't take Reeves seriously at first either, but he's a big time scorer. I actually watched him a lot in college, so that's why I didn't believe in him. I was like, this guy's excellent. He's sick. At Oklahoma, he was an awesome scorer. I'm just not sure if the athleticism that you can get away with in college is going to be able to work in the NBA. And I'll admit, I was wrong. He's more than athletic enough, and he's big enough to get after it defensively. So we all know Reeves is a solid player, but I think if he has a few games on Team USA where he's leading the team in scoring on a team with Anthony Edwards, I think you'll finally have people who don't think he's great start to admit, all right, this Reeves kid is the real deal.
Yeah, I feel that, man. That's actually not; those are pretty intriguing choices. I like your choices that you made there. For me, real briefly, the person that's gonna help Anthony, help this team excel from Team USA perspective, to me, is Anthony Edwards. That dude is already a bona fide star in this league, and he's already known that he can hang with the best. But he's the next one coming up to where you don't want to mess with him. And I think his experience with Team USA actually shows him the ropes on what it really means to be that much of a star. This could be his connection to what Kobe was to LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and others in that 08 Olympic team, where they're showing the ropes of what it really means to be a superstar in this league. And learning that through Team USA is going to elevate their game that much more to where next season they're going to come out killing. I think that could be something that Anthony Edwards can learn from this group, and learn that, and he could take that coming into next season already in game shape, already ready to roll, already skilled and polished, to where the Timberwolves, Karl-Anthony Towns and them better come with it, because this dude's going to take them off. So I definitely think from Team USA perspective, Anthony Edwards is going to be one of the main keys to help get them over the flow, especially since he's not just always known as a good offensive player, but he's shown defensively, if he really plays defense to the best of his ability, he can hang with the best. But we talk about coming into the league as a whole and how they can use it to boost their status in the league. To me, it's Brandon Ingram, because Brandon Ingram had some ups and downs with his tenure in the New Orleans Pelicans. And we've always known that he can continue to take that next leap. Yes, he's been an all-star with the New Orleans Pelicans. But this past year, you could argue was a disappointment for him. And because of the disappointing situation, obviously injuries played a huge role in that. But the Pelicans started off as one of the best teams in the league. And then with Zion Williamson going down and Brandon Ingram not staying afloat, and at the time, CJ McCollum as well, they fell out of the playoff race. If Brandon Ingram can use that motivation and learn what he learned from Team USA to translate over, you could see a different BI that could really keep the Pelicans afloat and take this team to the next level, with or without Zion Williamson. He's going to be one of that main centerpiece outside of Zion to really take this team to the next level. And I think he has the capabilities of doing that. But Team USA is going to show him that, because he's working with the best of the best. So that's what I think. We'll see if it really happens. But Team USA is obviously doing their exhibition series. And obviously we'll see how things come out from a World Cup perspective, because at the end of the day, this isn't your typical lineup that you would expect to represent Team USA in a FIBA international competition such as this.
And just to touch on your Ingram point quickly, I like that you said that, just because Ingram and Anthony Edwards, Brandon Ingram and Anthony Edwards, I think were both in the same situation of they were thrust into being the face of their franchise a little bit quicker than they expected. Mm-hmm. And they both have super talented teammates who used to be the face of the franchise in Karl Anthony Towns and Zion Williamson. And I think both of their teams are going to be better once they and Edwards and Ingram step up to be the vocal leaders, and you have Zion and Karl Anthony Towns take a step back and be sort of the second fiddle. So you're exactly right that for both of these guys, Team USA for them is almost going to have a bigger off the court impact potentially on how people perceive them. So it definitely will be big.
For sure, man. For sure. We're gonna end this show out with a last quick highlight on Shy League. Shout out to Wilson. Wilson Basketball. They partnered with Shy League to make sure they throw this event every year. The Pro-Am is now complete. The championship round was just this past Sunday, and pretty much a sold out venue at Whitney Young. The women's championship and the men's championship took place, but most importantly, the YMCA basketball clinic was hosted by Wilson and Shy League. Wilson and Shy League made a $25,000 donation to the YMCA of Metropolitan Chicago. A lot of professional basketball players, including Jabari Parker, Chicago's very own DJ Stewart, and up-and-coming player who used to be the top JUCO player in the world before he went to New Mexico State. And now he's actually transferred from New Mexico State, which reportedly is going to Memphis to play for Penny Hardaway and Deshaun Washington. A lot of those top players came out, balled out. We had special appearances, especially Chicago Bulls' very own Javon Carter came out and checked out the scene. So it was a heck of an experience. Great game. Great games in general. But it means a lot to the city to put these programs together and to show the community in a way to give back and expose talent like this. Chicago will always be viewed as one of the top meccas of basketball, hands down.
Yeah, and also they got a lot of stars who always like to give back. You know, unfortunately, yes. I wasn't able to make it out there this year, but past years I've been there. Bobby Simmons is a guy who always is sort of around. Anyone who has a local tie to sort of Chicago is always going to be out there. So it's always great. I've talked to Jahlil Okafor and Jabari Parker at these events. They're out there just walking around talking to people because they're at home, they're comfortable. So yeah, if anyone ever in the future you have a chance to go, I'd always recommend it, because you're going to see some great basketball and have a good time. And it's also great that they actually made it a charity event as well and were able to make a good donation there. So overall, nothing but love for it. And although we know it's not something that's going to help a ton in a player's development for the NBA or anything of that nature, I believe I saw Talen Horton-Tucker potentially out there too. And he's a guy I do expect to have a big season. So it was nice to see some guys who are actually having some NBA success also out there too.
Yeah, for sure. Talen Horton-Tucker, as well as Dalen Terry from the Bulls, was there as well. So it's definitely great to see professional athletes give back in this manner in various ways. Previous years, you've had guys like Bobby Portis, Javonte Green, Malcolm Hill, and others have come out and actually support the league, this league as well. So shout out to Shy League, shout out to Jabba, who's the commissioner, runs the show over there. Looking forward to another year next year of Shy League, and obviously bigger and better. For big time programs like this to be a staple here in Chicago, man. Looking forward to attending and seeing that again.
Yeah, glad you brought up Jabba. Definitely shout out. That dude is everywhere, always in the city.
Jabba's my dude, man. Yeah. I love Jabba. Love that guy, man. But that being said, though, winding down to the end of our show here, Mike. Let everybody know where they can find you and your work, and your social, so that way they can continue to follow what you're doing.
Yeah, so you can just follow me on Twitter at Zen Master Mike. That is Zen Master Mike. That's Z-E-N. Yeah, pretty much literally anything important that's going on will be on my Twitter, along with me constantly running my mouth about hip hop or cops falling down slides or whatever is going on social media at the moment. So definitely follow me there, have a laugh, talk some hoops with me, and yeah, follow Bulls Confidential as well. Still working on some stuff. We're revamping the site right now, but we will definitely be getting excited for some preseason games. They're coming up quicker than people expect, and actually seeing the new look players and how they fit into the system is going to be great. So yeah, man, follow me on Twitter, Zenmaster Mike, and let's get ready for the season.
All right, man. You can follow me on Instagram and the Twitter at Josh M. Hicks Media. Follow War Media on all social media platforms at War Media, including YouTube. Follow our YouTube channel where you can get the latest video version of this episode, as well as the other podcasts around at Bad Podcast with my boy Saul Rodriguez and upcoming Bears content. You name it, we all over the place. So wherever you go, you'll never miss not seeing War Media wherever you go, man. So get used to it. That being said, obviously your boy Joshua M. Hicks. We got our guy here, Mike Walton. Appreciate you guys checking out the show. Bulls Nation, go Bulls. Signing off.